BetterinWriting, which is a very interesting handle. BetterinWriting. BetterinWriting says that they are quite fascinated with the exaggeration that theater props have to possess in order to convey narrative things to audiences from far yet close distances. How do you go about creating a prop with that characteristic? I love this question, and I love it because it speaks to this it's this really particular aspect of making that is super important, but not often discussed. Hold on just a second. So I got my start in the professional realm of design and construction as a graphic designer. I worked in New York in the mid-'80s for a place called Laura Teresi Design. Laura had a small design firm with just four designers. Yeah. And they did annual reports for people like AT&T and stuff like that, which is a huge business and difficult, exacting work. And I was a type specker back then because we didn't have computers. If you got we didn't have computers to do graphic design in 1987. So when AT&T said it's time to do our annual report, they gave us like 100 pages of typewritten shit that was all the information that needed to go in the annual report. Then we had to break that down into what chapters it would go in, how the annual report would be broken down. And then my job as a type specker was literally to count every character and figure out how many column inches of text that we would end up having to graphically lay out. And you don't count every single character. You average out, you count the characters in 3 lines and multiply it out, et cetera, and you try it several times with a couple of different modalities to come up with your estimate. And I was pretty good at it. But that is a side note. I'm digressing too much. The thing about graphic design, the thing about design in general, but graphic design really specifically is it forces you to become attuned to the flow of something visually. And by that I mean, let's say that I'm doing a newsletter, and I want a nice big title, a nice big title card, and then I want some text, and then I want a couple of badges with some text at the bottom. And let's say I have a body of a letter, right? And so, like graphically, if I'm thinking about a certain thing, I'll lay it out like this in pen on a piece of paper. And this is just the first pass of how I get to think about how the various elements of this piece will work in concert with each other. And then you go in, you take the text, you pop it in. When the text doesn't fit to the shape or the shading of what I was hoping, I adjust it. I make it bigger, smaller, use a different font, I make it heavier, I make it lighter. But what I'm looking for is a balance of elements. I'm looking for the communication of information. That's the most important thing. What is this flyer about? Is it about an announcement for our HOA for Wednesday night? Well, then that should be the first thing I learn upon gazing upon it. And graphic design really forces you to refine in that regard. Not that other forms of design do not, because they all do. It's just that it's frequently subtextual. By that, I mean, let us say you are doing a rendition of Lord of the Rings on stage because your high school has decided to do that. Now let us say that you go and you buy a plastic sting sword, but you also have somebody who has a different sting sword. Now, how do you choose which one of these to use for your stage production? Well, the answer is not as simple as you would think. It's really about the director and the production designer giving each one of these to the actor and then having them stand on stage and work through some scenes and asking themselves, does that look like a hobbit with sting? Is that telling the story that I want to tell? Is the sword too big for him? Do I notice that? Okay, if the sword's too big, let's go with a smaller sword. Is the sword too small? Can I not see the sword? Is it flashing? Do I need to change the color of the blade? So in the way that I approach props and costumes is always from that distance you take with graphic design. I'm looking at it and thinking, is the character coming out? And is there a part of the character that I'm not noticing? Or is there something that's sticking out to me that shouldn't? So it's not about which one of these is right. It's about which one helps the whole gestalt of the costume and the actor on the stage and the setting tell the story that needs to be told. And so the reason I love graphic design is it takes that subtlety and makes it completely textual. Am I getting the point of this flyer, this piece of paper, this graphical excursion? Am I getting its point instantly? Or is it taking me a while to figure out? I can't tell you how many invites I've had that talk about the location, but don't tell me what the party is for, or, that don't tell me when it is, or that don't tell me who's involved. The world is replete with horrifying examples of bad graphic design. But the study of it and the study of that communication is amazing to me, because everything is communication. Everything in a costume is a communication, and every bit of weight and balance and color yields a flow of a narrative. Yeah, I think I've said the same thing at least twice. BetterinWriting, that's how I approach a theater prop, the construction of a theater or movie prop, but it's also how I construct kind of everything. And it all stems from graphics. Seriously, it is hard to make a beautiful invite, but it is such a worthy thing to do. And I strongly recommend anybody in an artistic profession plays around with graphic design specifically. I just think it makes everything that you do a little better. And it's really, really good to have your own ideas and opinions about the graphic design that you like. One more story about graphic design. So when I wrote my book, Every Tool's a Hammer, Life is What You Make It, Simon & Schuster, my publisher, said, do you have any font preferences? And I was like, oh, do I? Yes, I do. My two favorite fonts are Caslon, a beautiful serif font, and Futura Extra Bold. And they said, great. And they sent me a mock-up of the cover, and it had a sans serif font, presumably Futura for the title, and then there was some Caslon, and I looked at it and I thought, I don't think that that's Futura. And so I asked them, and they were like, we don't know. It came from the graphics department. And I said, well, could I see the original file? And they're like, no, we don't share that. Just fine, fair enough. So I took their mock-up, I opened it up in my Photoshop, I made the title again in Futura and laid it over, and sure enough, not Futura. So I wrote back and I said, you didn't use Futura, let's use Futura. And they were like, great, no problem. And they did. And the cover is something I'm really happy with. I think the design department did a great job. But for one thing, which is when they fixed that, and they did not fix the spine of the book in its first printing. So if you've got one of the early printings of Every Tool's a Hammer and you pull off the dust jacket, you will notice that the sans serif font on the spine is different because it's not Futura. Simon & Schuster, I am not paying you guys out. Your graphics department did a wonderful job. I just wished that I hadn't had... people bring me my book to sign, and I have to stare at that spine because they don't usually bring it with a dust jacket on it. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced Word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.